Thank you. Can you hear me? As my father likes to say, a legend in my own mind. I love coming here to Arizona. It's kind of, reminds me a lot of where I live in LA, just on a little bit smaller scale. And I'm finding out too, you guys also have the Argentinian architecture mafia here as well. So it's a lot closer than we all might think. So we got to watch out for those folks. And it's good to see friends, old friends and faces. It's really, I'm glad to kind of come in our regional area and be around like-minded colleagues. So thank you for having me. I'm going to talk a little bit different than I usually do tonight, and show some things I don't normally show. The idea of sort of detail, so I'm going to delve into some things that I generally don't even show. But what I do want to do is talk a little bit about how I think first, or how we think. And I show this because this explains it, I think, better than my own work. It's two artists. On the right is Goldsworthy. On the left is a German artist named Voth. And I don't know a whole lot about Voth, but we've been fortunate to have a pretty steady stream of German interns, and I found one book about him in German. So when they get there, the first thing they have to do is translate 10 pages for me. So I'm learning. But you really don't need to read much about them. There he is, late as usual. You really don't need to read much about them because the work is so powerful. And what you notice right off is that formally the work is big, it's bold, it's strong, and it's kind of the first thing that hits you with both artists. But as you delve more deeply into their work, you begin to see something beyond just what you see. In the case of Voth on the left, you see this journey beginning, and the drawing of not just the piece but of the process, and Goldsworthy's snowball completely out of context, not just in its place but scale. And both artists go to great lengths actually to photograph the making and the deconstruction of their work. And what you begin to discover in their work is it transforms into something that you really never imagined. It goes kind of beyond just the visual of what you thought you saw is really something completely different. And Goldsworthy's snowball turns into a pile of rocks, and Voth's sarcophagus, he takes it on this journey, making you much more aware of your place. And in the end, for both artists, it's really not about the object, it's about the objective. And that's kind of what we try to do with our work, is to leave something behind, leave something ingrained in one's senses, regardless of what the building is. So I always aspire to people, I don't care if they remember my building, but I do care that they remember being there. And so for us, it's really about that experience on many different levels. It kind of started for me with this project at a time where, I just moved to LA and I was struggling to do anything but a house addition. And along came this director with an impossible budget and time schedule, but it was something that was not residential, and I committed to doing this project from start of the design to when they moved in 15 weeks, so basically one of your semesters. And I did this, I had this idea about this container, the idea that not the container itself, but the story that was embedded in the container. I carried this little ad you can see up there in my wallet for a long time. It still runs in the LA Times every day, because if you go to the ports, you see piles of containers. And it talks about our trade imbalance, the transfer of goods from east to west. There's a story already there. And I was kind of interested in the story that came with the container, not necessarily the container itself. And I also reading when Venturi wrote, in Complexity and Contradictions, he talked about a familiar thing being seen in an unfamiliar way. And he stated that it becomes both perceptually old and new at the same time. So, for me, it was kind of creating this experience and working fast. The drawings that you see there, these were the design drawings, the construction drawings, and the client presentation drawings. Okay, they're all in one, and they happen to be all freehand on 11 by 17 paper. So, we went down to the building department, and I talked my way into getting a permit in about a week with just some plan. We're going to just move some walls around. And we started construction with these kind of drawings. And we kept drawing through the whole process. And, we would one day, the contractor would say, well, that beam you are asking for, I can't get it for 2 weeks. Can you do a different kind of beam? Well, what can I get? And so we work with it. So it was really a collaboration with the people who built this, not just the builder, but the people, the steel workers, everyone were really part of the process. And we did what I thought some pretty amazing detailing, the finishing of the steel, the connections, the whole thing in, a really short time. It just opened my eyes to the potential of building, the value of that. And, actually the act of making is some way we're forgetting about that in a way, like putting your hands on the work. And I found that there's great value in that and opens the door for things that you couldn't just draw. So when we finished that, I looked back at, I thought about my days in New York working for Paul Rudolph, and some of my colleagues dragged me up to this place in upstate New York. It's called Opus 40. And Opus 40 was done by that man right there on the right. That's Harvey Feit. He's a sculptor. He bought this piece of property. It was an abandoned bluestone quarry, and he bought it for the obvious reasons, abundant supply of stone for his sculptures. Well, he did very little sculpture there, but he built this remarkable place called Opus 40. And I was taken by the idea that, he went into this place with one intention and exited with something completely different. And, he died while working on this in an accident, but he built this remarkable environment that's way better than any sculptures that he ever did. And so I started to look at, other artists, guys like Henry Moore and sculptors and how they kind of make their work. And, they don't actually draw drawings of their work. They draw the intentions of their work. And so they have this kind of freedom that allows them to let their work evolve as they make it. And I always thought, how can I work more like a sculptor and not get sued and, all those other things that come with being an architect. So, I do where I get great value and pleasures. I I use students as my guinea pigs. You know, we work together. So, you know, I proposed a project. This was at Woodbury, to build a small project for one of my nonprofit clients. And this was done in a summer in 8 weeks for $3,000 and basically no drawings. So we spent 1 week building some models, coming up with an idea. This is a portable construction training center. So it's for inner city kids. This nonprofit helps them get a GED, driver's license, get off drugs, and teach them a construction skill, and then they pay for part of their placement in a job. So we were giving them a home made from a mobile home. So this would be move around to different sites. So we just started tearing into the project with, we had three key goals that the students wanted to achieve, and we started building. And this is it in the end. It won a bunch of ACSA awards, but you know what's so interesting for me, it's left raw because they work in it, they practice wiring, putting in disposals, sinks, and so forth. But the flooring is carpet tile. And you know, one of the students just took it and turned it upside down, and it was rubber on the bottom. And it's like an incredibly beautiful feeling floor by simply taking that carpet and like turning it over. And you know, those kind of things are hard to like draw. You kind of need to put your hands like on the work. So I realized at that point there was another way to practice, that there was a way where you can achieve certain tactile things without just drawing. So we started something in our office where we always make things, and it's a combination with our staff, with students. You know, we're always trying things. Like these are bricks that we made with the idea that the bricks would erode. So they have salt embedded in them, and we basically make the contraption that ages them to see kind of what would happen in doing that. And you know, these just kind of give you some ideas. So I got containers full of these things that I'm paying rent on. So if any of you want some of them, I'm happy to reduce my load. But we have part of our office where we just give ourselves, like we follow ideas, and they don't really have a beginning or an end. We just run them until they fizzle out, or an application comes for them, or we pull them out of the locker and we decide to do something with them. So we have, in some sense, like a parallel universe within our office where we're kind of just doing these things that are of interest to us. This is another one where I got very interested in wood and our kind of perception of wood, where we generally think of that as, you know, that's our image of wood. It's like a stick. It's something we build with, or it's a tree. And, you know, I just thought, can you get that? Can you find that in-between area where it's, in a sense, the wood's both organic and inert? So we started making models. We started drawing things on the computer. We had no idea what we're doing. We're just making them, and it started out with trying to broadcast light through the wood, and you know, turned into then looking at the CNC machine to kind of bring the wood to life. And we made other computer models, again, just trying to find what that meaning is for us. And while we were doing this, someone in my office handed me an RFP for a request for proposals. It was for a sculpture for a park in Santa Monica. So I thought, you know what, let's do that. And I made this little sketch and submitted it, and we wound up winning. You know, now I had to build it. We called this liquid wood, and it was really a continuation of that investigation with the wood, where, you know, we then started to make some computer models some renderings, but also some physical making. And those became these things became kind of the template for us to put our hands on the work. And so these are parallel beams that we kind of rough cut based on what we did, and then glued together and made into kind of this park bench. It's in Clover Park in Santa Monica. And for me, like a lot of people, in the discussions we had with the city, it's like, well, people can't really sit on that, It's like, how are they supposed to sit on it? And I had the hardest time convincing them that this is actually a better way to sit. It has different scales. It's more interesting. Little kids can go on it. They finally, I think, just relented out of my persistence, And so, I over the years, I've gone back, and as I do with a lot of my work, I just go look and see how it, has performed or is performing. And, it's amazing. The city even has called me and said, this gets more use than any bench in the park. And, so it's like, for me, it's great because it's like, it's art, but people can come, they're not afraid to touch it. They come, they jump on it. And so for me, the idea that someone engages themselves with the work is just as important as the work itself. So, we carried on the idea with wood, and a project came along to remodel a Frank Gehry building. And we wound up transforming this into a series of studios in an interior space by CNC routing glulam beams. And when you also draw these, we found that we were getting prices from contractors that would go through the roof. They'd look at it and they go, oh my God, that's going to be really expensive. Let's just, that last job we did with all the glass, just triple that price and we'll make it work within there. So, I started getting work that was coming in really expensive. So I just started going directly to the people that make it. And I would talk to them and start collaborating with them of how to do it. And so I would literally hand the contractor the price. And they would just get the wood, it would be numbered, and they would follow the numbers and just put it up based on the numbers. And it's like the people who make things actually seem to have a lot more interest in trying things than the contractors who just feared, the unknown or the new. So we have a lot of relationships with vendors to make these kind of things where we're almost in some ways part builder. So this is the office, this is the wall. There are doors in there and there are edit studios in there. My client loves it because he points to the wall, says Studio 2, and his clients look at him kind of funny, and they go and they feel the wall, and then the door opens. But, again, I think this is really part of that experiment of trying to bring capture that moment where the wood is both, inert and organic. While we were doing this, I was making my usual early morning run to Starbucks, and they were painting this bus shelter right by my house. And, it was incredible, the color, the light, so I took a picture and I got to the office, and that was our new exercise. So we started immediately to look at how light can broadcast through different materials. We looked at recycled glass, marbles, you name it. And I got obsessed with these drawings on the bottom, and you probably have seen it. You go to the hardware store, and they have these 1/8 inch thick acrylics. There are millions of them, colors, and there's not one pretty color. They're all ugly, So I just got rings of them trying to just make a nice color, and it dawned on me that the stacking of them could produce kind of a richness with the light. So we got to a point before the project finished, and we made all these offices skylit, and it's basically backlighting for these 8 layers of 1/8 inch acrylic that then broadcasts the colored light into the space. So, you know, we're always like making things and don't know their purpose or where they're going to wind up. And they're most of the times laying around the office. And we have clients that see them and they ask about them, you know, and like this one, they were asking, what's this? And I explained it to them. And this particular client said, well, can I have one of those? You know, and I said, I don't see why not. And we were doing a prop placement company where they give away merchandise to well-known people. So, you know, they could say, you know, Shaquille O'Neal wears a, you know, I don't know, some product, you know. So they needed a dressing room. So we kind of said, you know, let's try and make a dressing room. The project was under construction, but we quickly kind of turned this into a full-scale piece and just started making it. So, you know, here we are going to the site, and my client had moved in, and they were very anxious to get their dressing room. And, you know, he asked me, well, what does it get covered with? And I said, well, we're almost there. I got it under control. It's coming soon. I had no idea what it was going to be covered with. And I, you know, was trying to figure it out. And after repeated calls from my client, I was about to fess up to him and tell him I had no idea what I was doing. So, you know, then I'm driving home, and the place, the mechanic right on the corner of my block, who fixed my old Volvo for years, for the first time ever, I saw this sign on his building that said, "Will shrink wrap anything." And I pulled right in. I said, "William, you do shrink wrap?" And he's like, he started laying it on me. I shrink wrap boots for this, and you know, he was laying it on thick. So I went back to the office. I got that little maquette, and I brought it over to him. I said, "Can you shrink wrap this?" You know. So I left it with him, and I was bugging him, and 2 days go by, and I stopped in to see him, and he was suddenly a whole lot more humble. It didn't quite work out the way he was expecting, nor the way I was hoping. So I talked to him, like, what worked, what didn't work, you know, and we spent about an hour or so talking about it, and I, you know, took this thing back to my office. We made some modifications based on what William was telling us, and I convinced him to do it, you know, at full scale in the space. So here it is, and he made it kind of like a pig on a spit, and you know, away we went. So there it is in place. You know, but you really can't draw that, and you can't predict, you know, a lot of it. So we do what I like to call calculated risk taking. We're not cowboys. We don't just do stuff and, you know, it fails. We talk to our clients, we bring them along, we include them in the process, and we try and make, you know, we try to create the richness with that and not try and predict every last movement in what we do. So we're always looking for like different people who make things that have different skills all over the place. You know, like a guy I found who could roll all this metal with this old piece of junk machinery, you know, and we have a job. And I say, well, can we do, you know, I talk to him, can we make this, can we do that? And we get some feedback from them and work with them, and we base a lot of ideas around the parameters that we have to work with, and we go back to work and we create these things that are, you know, highly technical, but also based on, you know, what someone can make. And we wound up doing many projects. We got known in LA as doing these really interesting things really fast, you know, and how we did it was we had like different construction. We had 2 constructions going on simultaneously. You know, like you could see there, the space is almost done. and all this stuff was being built off-site, and we would just bring it in, and it would come in pieces. And so we made these, in this case, we made these boardrooms out of all this fabricated rebar and some tube steel and plate. But I was also real interested in stucco, you know, and I know you guys probably have the same thing in LA. Everyone hates stucco, you know, and I was determined to find something beautiful about it. So we wound up using the stucco, but we plastered it from the interior so that the plaster or stucco actually oozed through the lat, and we left it. So you know, again, this is kind of, for me, revealing a story that we already know is there. Like if you look at the cavity of a wall, this is what you see. It's like psychoanalysis, you know it's there, but it's not revealed, and we just reveal the story. So you get this kind of beautiful texture, again, that people they want to touch or caress it, and you get this really nice contrast between, you know, the smooth and the roughness. So we were doing so many projects like this. We couldn't keep up with them, and you know, this was kind of like our typical space that we were given, and everyone loves these spaces. You know, they're just beautiful in their raw state. And what we try to do when we have that is to actually, when we're done, it should look just like that, you know. And so many people try to screw it up, so we try and take that and turn it into that. And if you see, like always on these shelves, there's almost no trace of air conditioning, no trace of lighting, no trace of sprinklers. It really doesn't matter. Like our work becomes kind of inserted into these things, and it doesn't matter what, you know, what it is. It's kind of the same attitude, no matter what the shell is, whether it be these beautiful old wooden warehouse or these cheapy kind of 1960s Butler buildings where, again, if you look, it's super clean, what's existing there. And we got to do, and we still do, almost everything. You know, the desks, the furniture, even the carpets. You know, like in this case, we would go to the carpet store, and we would just go pick remnants, whatever they had, like remnants and like big pieces. This is about $50 in remnants that we got. And we would package them up, we would take them to our studio, lay them out, and we'd come up with kind of a pattern, and then we'd send it off to a guy to stitch them all together. So this is just another example where, you know, we did the desks, the furniture, the bar stools, everything. And I love doing that and getting into that detail. We've done doors, stairs, lights, you know, tables, benches, even hinges. You know, it's like we kind of leave if you let us, we'll leave no stone unturned. And we love doing that, you know, at almost any scale. And, you know, what we found is that it spawned a whole industry in LA. Now, I don't claim to be the guy who invented it. There's guys before me like Frank Israel and such who were doing this, but our work kind of brought a resurgence to that. And suddenly there, you know, I took this picture, you know, everything was now creative space. Like you take the crappiest building that exists, and the realtors would put a sign on it like they had the golden, you know, egg. It was there, you just don't know it. But everything was, you know, creative space. So designers were really changing the landscape, and I think we underestimate our power, you know, that we bring to what design can bring to people. And, you know, I always think about that, and I think about what is design? And what does it mean to not just us, but people? And I believe that there's really a fine line between art and popular culture. I think there's very little difference between the peculiar and the beautiful. And I'm interested in where that moment occurs, where they coexist. I'm interested in being both the teacher and the student, and trying to find the extraordinary within the ordinary. So I want to just show you some other things that where that's kind of led me. And I look at these all the time. Like cups, the things I try to look right in front of my face and not invent something, but bring out the story that exists. So, one of my first corporate clients, I had this idea, and when I walked the site with my client, he kept hammering me. It was the first client I had who really cared about design, and he kept asking, "What are you thinking? What are you thinking?" And I didn't want to tell him because I was afraid I would be fired on the first meeting. And somehow he got it out of me, and I said, "I'm thinking Dixie Cups." And he said, "You are not doing Dixie Cups in my space." So I went back to the office, and I had Vanessa make that little mock-up on the left there, and I emailed it to him. And I got the proverbial email back with the capital wow and all the exclamation points. He's like, "What is it?" I said, I emailed him back, "It's Dixie Cups." So after much negotiation and leaving him with thousands of extra Dixie Cups, we did this, and it's has a purpose. It was a space about 20,000 square feet full of offices, small offices. And I did something I don't really do, is consuming the perimeter with offices and robbing natural light to the space. So I basically came up with this idea of these oculus in a solid wall that would then project light through the colored Dixie Cups. They're all CNC milled. They pop in and out, so if someone crushes them, you just pop another one back in. Super simple. Well, again, I stopped by here from time to time, and the guy who didn't want Dixie Cups in his space, I would go there one day, it's all clear cups. Another day, it's all yellow cups, The guy didn't want Dixie Cups now playing with my building, I think that's great. That's phenomenal, So I always look for things like ping-pong balls, It's and it's great because when you call these people and you ask to order 20,000 ping pong balls, they look at this architect, he's got to be an idiot, But for us, it's really not just about beauty, but it's about performance. And this is an edit studio, which I had done lots and lots of them. And we were always forced into making them black boxes, no windows in them at all. And I was mystified by the idea that one wouldn't want natural light in their space. And it came down to a problem of glare. And windows or light makes glare on a screen. And so through all these things, working with different materials, we found the ping pong balls actually broadcast enough light through, but also deflect enough so that it becomes this sort of uniform pixelation on the monitor, and there's no real glare. So it just reduces the resolution. So they now have these really great studios with natural light. And for us, it's when people see it, they respond to kind of other things like the texture, the quality of it, and then when they get up close and they realize it's something they know, it heightens the experience for them. So you do that, and I'm always mystified. I come in, one day my client made this table. He had extra ping pong balls, and they get into it. They want to be part of it, and I think that's fantastic, that ugly thing my client made, but it's great, So, we're always looking at things, and I don't know. I see things, and maybe I see something different, but everything I look at, I see a building, and maybe that's weird. But brooms, like I thought, can we make a building out of brooms, And I proposed it to my client. He's like, you can't make a building out of brooms, but isn't it going to collect dirt? And I had no answer to that. So I contacted the broom maker, can you send me, 50 brooms, and I call and ask questions. Now this guy is wondering, what's that guy doing? I think they sense industrial espionage, right? So he flies out to come see what we're doing. And we show him, and he's like, that's great. He said, you don't have to use those brooms. I can make runs 40 feet long. And I go, but isn't it going to collect dirt on it? He's like, no, we have this stuff, no dirt whatsoever. I just regurgitate that to my client. They think I'm brilliant, So there's this benefit of like working with people and like listening, and like we have this all the time in my own office, where I tell people, call them, talk to them, and find out if we can do this, and then I'll talk to my staff. And I say, hey, did you find out about that? Yeah, we can't do that. I said, did you talk to him? He said, no, I emailed him. I said, okay, I'm going to go get on the phone, and I'm going to call him, and I'm going to talk to him and find out if we can do that. And if we can't, there's going to be some trouble. You sure you don't want to go give him a call? And they call up, and in discussion you find out you can accomplish things. So I think communication, really, there's a place for it. So there's the building. It's, soft building made out of brooms. And it's, it becomes a thing that filters the light, is its purpose. Everything, cans, we make a building out of, we work with a local recycle center to make a building facade using crushed cans. I had to go lobby the state to allow them to do this. There's apparently a lot of corruption in aluminum recycling. So we worked out a way where they could crush smaller blocks as opposed to the big, Mondo blocks, and we made an affordable housing project. And I'll bet that this is the only affordable housing project on the planet that has Schlitz malt liquor built into their facade. We just finished this store in downtown LA, made all out of paper, the whole thing. And a lot of these things have logistical things, like getting the fire department to approve it and the testing, but everything, the shelves, the countertops, the lights, the whole thing, all made out of paper, 100% paper. It's for ASOP. Even the millwork, all made that way. And they call it the trapeze. It's the kind of window display shelf. It's actually made out of copper tubing, but the same kind of concept of how we do it. That's just getting installed. This is the piece that's made. Skateboards. Here's a kitchen backsplash made using cut-up recycled skateboards. And there you see, like, in the space. So for us, that's like an ongoing kind of project, just always looking right in front of our face. This is the project. It's a housing, mixed-use housing in Hollywood. And it deploys this kind of screen. A light is another thing that we always look at, the kind of power and the beauty of light, not just what it adds to the space, but how you control it. So we, again, work with a local manufacturer to design and construct this single shutter. And the whole building is made from this shutter, and it acts as a performative device. So it's in a very busy area. We have what's essentially a porch, and that wraps the building, so it provides thermal comfort. You can it's like a radiator. You can regulate the heat into the space. It controls privacy or openness. So it serves a whole multitude of functions that are performative but also aesthetic. And we find that when you can build the performance into the building, it's very hard to value engineer out. The clients have a very tough time removing it. But I was really interested in this. It's an artist named Patrick Hughes. And let's see if I can get this to work. He did these paintings called Prospectivity, where the canvas is shaped in a way so that when the user moves by them, is that moving or no? Is it static? Sorry, it did. Well, if I could get it to work, you would see that it basically looks like it's moving or changing, and it's based on the user's kind of position to the canvas. I'm not going to get it to work, so I apologize. But our idea was that our building could have similar attributes to where it would be in constant motion, but it would really be a reflection of the users based on kind of performance, whether they want to be public or private, hot or cold, or what have you. So in a sense, our building redesigns itself every day and sometimes every hour or their portion thereof. And so it really becomes a reflection of who's there and of the occupants in the space. So these, again, the light, it's the combination of these spaces with the light. I mean, I love these buildings. They're just so direct and honest and beautiful. When we finished the building in Monterrey, Mexico last year, and it was for a auto manufacturer, and this was an office building with a research component, but I wanted to capture this in their building. And so, we made these diagrams that were light views and performance diagrams of, how the building could be performative, but how that could also help shape the aesthetic. So light, that kind of clear story became a real guiding factor for us. You can see they're massive clear stories on this building. And we had an orientation where their front of their building was facing west, not great. So, we worked with a local person in Monterey to develop this kind of skin that could be a light modulator for the building. So you can see it here with the north-facing clear stories, and then the skin that would also regulate light through it. So it not only would allow light into the building, but at night it would reflect that light back out of the building. And so here you get an idea of the space where they work. And I don't know if you can see it or not, but that milky surface in the back, you actually can see the pattern move across that surface during the day, and you get really a nice sense of light and view kind of in that space. And this is the overall view of it. Again, like if you look at the shading of that building, that big glass surface, it's entirely in shade. So we model those things. We look at that, of how sun hits it, and we try to make our buildings perform well. And again, just looking at, there are so many beautiful things out there. Like this is just a screen at Bastakia in Dubai. A typical sort of building. Its performance is great, but it's also beautiful. And so we're constantly looking at those kinds of things. A building in a little museum in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is another thing which I think about a lot. When we started this project, my client's idea was to tear this building down and just build a whole new building. And it's not the greatest building in the world, but it had, spatially was really nice. These steel trusses, big brick walls around a very tall space, and I thought to myself, why don't we just try and save that building? I mean, and we can add on, we could save it, we could probably make our dollars go a lot further. And so we wound up saving the building and also getting about $3 million in historic tax credits. So instead of this building costing $10 million, it wound up costing $3 million. And you get things that you can't build today. But I was really, you can see on the side of that building, that's the truck dock. I don't know, I just got attached to that truck dock over there. And I was like, maybe that should be our entry, not like on the center axis of the building, but let's make that our entry. So we started to look at that roof or that space over there. How could that, be something that coexists with the old? And, drawing that. So I think you get a lot of power too when you make the old and the new kind of work together. So we, in a sense, built like a southern porch on the side of the building. And that became kind of the entry. And again, the idea of light, I wanted to have a porch, but it should be like a light-filled porch. So we had these patterns here, and I learned an old trick from Marlin, a southern trick. You paint all this open structure like sky blue, and no insects go in it because they think it's the sky. And it works. But you get this porch that really becomes, tied to the tradition, but also provides this really nice quality of light to the space. And then, the interior, what we did was we made the entry not on axes. We basically come in the side of the building. So it's like a cross axis to the building. You can see that in red. And it has a basement. So, could we take advantage of the basement? They saw the basement as throwaway space. And I thought it could be really a more integral part of the space if we kind of look at how you enter and, could we open up to that area below? So we wound up cutting a big swatch through the building, exposing the basement, and you get now sort of double the space. The basement really then becomes part of the space. And it's a great place for art, but it's also like an incredible place for people. And I've kind of been amazed at what's gone on here. I mean, I just have some shots that they send me all the time. They've had over 100 weddings there already. It's really become it's right next to the downtown, and it's become like the center of their warehouse district, and restaurants have popped up around it. It's really become a vibrant area, and it's they tell me, a great place for events and people, but it's also a serious place for art, and that's kind of the way we think of that. And that's the basement, the basement, which was the throwaway, that's also used, it's great. It's like you win on all levels. And we try to, you can't say it enough to think about how people use it. The last thing I'm going to show you is a fairly current proposal for a chapel, an interfaith chapel in Jacksonville, Florida. This is our site, and it's an interfaith chapel. It's like, okay, give me something that you can believe in that belongs to no one, but appeals to everyone. It's like a really hard challenge. And so I just started to think about, things of power, symbols. And there's these events that have dress, that like a wedding or a service, and buildings like, the chapel, white chapel on the landscape. They evoke a kind of power that I think transcends a particular faith or religion. And you know, I look back at some of my experiences in Florida. This building I loved growing up in Florida, done by Victor Lundy in 1958. It's an incredible building, you know. But again, they thought, look at the shadow line on it. You know, it's beautiful, but it performs really well, and you get this kind of magic space. And I wanted my space to be like that. And you know, I looked at other examples, like this is the Astoria National Guard Armory in Astoria, Oregon, built in 1926, and they used this technique called lamella, which is, you know, at the time they couldn't do long spans, so they used small members in kind of a thrust position to make these big spans. So, you know, I worked with Greg Otto to come up with this idea of making a structure that would almost be more like a formal vest around a building. And so it's a lamella structure. It has a big skylight at the top that also acts to move air through it. And the plan also addresses, you know, we learned, like from Nancy Holt, not just the summer equinox, but also the North Star. Like the North Star is in North America is always at 35 degrees north and constant. It's the only constant star in the sky. And so we started to make this aperture in our building that would look at the North Star when you went in at night. But also, I grew up in Florida, and you know, our house was the only house that would be dripping on the inside of the sliding glass, because my mother kept it at like 65 degrees and it was 100 out. So, you know, and I learned that when you go into buildings, well, you know it here too in a certain way, when it's 100 out, you open the door in an air-conditioned building, you freeze. You know, so we created these kind of, and studied these transitional zones, like how you arrive at a building, how you go in. And so you can kind of see that section too of not just the covering, but you know, the view to the North Star. And this is it, and its proposed configuration, and how you arrive to the building. And for us, the most important, kind of the interior space. So, you know, I'll leave you tonight with, you know, an idea, and I think design is really just an expression of purpose. And I think if you look like right in front of your face, you can find things that you could find more interesting things than if you try and invent something out of thin air. And I think we don't do that enough, is just look what's right before us. So I'll leave you with something I read to myself often that Eames wrote a long time ago. So thank you very much.